The restaurant was already tense long before the black car stopped outside. Everyone working there knew what that car meant. The moment it arrived, voices lowered, movements became faster, and smiles turned careful. This was not because the guest was famous, but because he was feared. He was a powerful CEO, one of the richest men in the city, and he came here often. Every visit followed the same pattern. He demanded perfection, spoke harshly, and reminded everyone that their jobs depended on his mood. The restaurant itself was elegant and expensive, the kind of place where people came to feel important. Crystal glasses lined the tables, soft music played in the background, and the lighting made everything look calm and warm. But behind the scenes, the kitchen was loud and stressed. The manager kept checking his watch. The head waiter wiped his hands again and again. Everyone knew that one mistake tonight could mean humiliation or worse. When the CEO walked in, the air seemed to change. He did not rush. He never did. He liked making people wait. His suit was sharp, his expression cold, and his eyes moved around the room like he owned every chair and every person in it. The manager rushed forward with a forced smile, greeting him with words of praise and respect. The CEO barely nodded. He expected this treatment. To him, it was normal. He was shown to his usual table near the window. It was the best seat in the house, always kept ready just for him. Other guests noticed and whispered, some impressed, some uncomfortable. The CEO sat down and looked around as if judging everyone. He tapped his fingers on the table, already impatient. In the kitchen, a new waitress stood quietly, holding her notepad. This was only her third day on the job. She had taken this work because she needed it badly. Life had not been easy for her, and she was used to standing on her own. She listened carefully during training, followed rules, and treated everyone with respect. No one had yet told her much about the CEO. They only said, "Be careful with that table." She did not fully understand what that meant. When the head waiter announced that she would serve the window table, a few people looked at her with worry. One server tried to switch shifts with her, but it was too late. Orders had already been assigned. The manager hesitated for a second but then nodded. Maybe he thought it was better if the new girl learned quickly. Or maybe he simply didn't want to deal with changing things. The waitress took a deep breath and walked toward the table. She reminded herself to stay calm, polite, and professional. That was all she could control. She greeted the CEO with a gentle smile and asked if he would like to see the menu, even though it was already in front of him. He looked up slowly, his eyes sharp and dismissive. "Do I look like I need help reading?" he said loudly. A few nearby guests glanced over. The waitress felt the heat rise to her face, but she did not step back. She apologized softly and asked if he would like water or something else to drink. "Water should already be here," he replied. "Isn't that your job?" She nodded and said she would bring it right away. Her voice stayed steady. Inside, she reminded herself that his words were about power, not about her. She returned with the water quickly, placing the glass carefully on the table. He watched her closely now, as if looking for something else to criticize. When she asked for his order, he sighed loudly and complained about the menu, the lighting, and even the temperature of the room. Each sentence was meant to make her feel small. In the past, waiters had responded with fear or fake smiles. Some had apologized again and again. Others had looked down, hoping the moment would pass. The CEO enjoyed that reaction. It made him feel important. But this time something was different. When he insulted her intelligence for asking a simple question, she paused. Just for a moment. Then she looked at him, not with anger, but with calm clarity. "I'm asking so I can serve you correctly," she said. "That's my job." Her voice was not loud, but it was firm, clear, honest. The table went silent. The CEO leaned back slightly, surprised. He was not used to this tone. He raised an eyebrow, studying her face as if trying to decide whether she was being brave or foolish. Around them, the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. The manager froze near the counter. Other staff members watched from a distance, fear written on their faces. They expected the worst. The CEO let out a short laugh, not a friendly one. "Careful," he said. You don't know who you're talking to. The waitress nodded once. I know I'm talking to a customer, she replied. And I want to do my work well. It wasn't rude. It wasn't insulting. But it was something no one had dared to say before. She was not lowering herself. She was standing where she was. The CEO stared at her for a long moment. For the first time, his usual confidence wavered just slightly. He waved his hand, ordering his food in a sharp voice. She wrote it down, thanked him, and walked away. As she reached the kitchen, her hands shook. She didn't show it outside, but inside she felt the weight of what had just happened. She knew there might be consequences. Still, she felt something else too. A quiet sense of dignity. Behind her, the restaurant slowly returned to sound. Plates clinked. Conversations resumed. But nothing felt the same anymore. Something small had shifted. The CEO sat alone at his table, staring out the window. He did not smile. For reasons he didn't fully understand, her calm words stayed with him. And deep inside, a question formed, one he had not faced in a very long time. The night was only beginning. The food went out to the table without delay. The waitress made sure everything was exactly as ordered. The plate was warm, the presentation clean, and the drink refilled before it was even half empty. She focused on her work, moving carefully, keeping her face calm. Inside, her heart was still beating fast. She knew the moment earlier had crossed an invisible line. In places like this, lines were not meant to be crossed. From the corner of her eye, she could feel the CEO watching her. Not in the usual careless way, but with attention, as if he was trying to figure something out. He took a bite of his food, then another, chewing slowly. For once, he did not complain immediately. That alone felt strange. Nearby, other staff whispered quietly. She's done for, one server muttered. No one talks back to him, another said. The manager kept glancing between the table and the kitchen, sweat forming on his forehead. He imagined angry phone calls, bad reviews, maybe even losing investors. All because a new waitress had forgotten her place. But the waitress did not see it that way. To her, it wasn't about talking back. It was about not allowing herself to be crushed. She had learned long ago that silence could slowly break a person. She had promised herself she would never disappear just to make someone else feel bigger. A few minutes passed. The CEO raised his hand sharply, snapping his fingers. She walked over right away. What now? He asked, his voice low but sharp. Do you always speak to customers the way you spoke to me? She met his eyes. I speak respectfully, she said. I try to do my job properly. He leaned forward. You think respect means correcting people? She shook her head gently. No. I think respect means not putting others down. That answer caught him off guard. He expected fear or at least an apology. Instead, he got honesty, the kind that didn't beg for approval. Around them, the restaurant seemed quieter again. A couple at the next table stopped talking. Someone set down a glass too carefully. The CEO smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You must think you're special, he said. She didn't smile back. No, she replied. I think I'm human. That was enough to make him sit back. For years, people around him had treated him like something above human. A title, a bank account, a voice that decided futures. No one had reminded him of something so simple in a long time. He waved his hand again, dismissing her. Bring dessert, he said, and make sure it's perfect. She nodded and stepped away. As she did, her legs felt weak. She knew she was walking on thin ground. Still, she felt steady inside. Whatever happened next, she had stayed true to herself. In the kitchen, the tension exploded. What were you thinking? A coworker whispered urgently. He could get you fired with one call. The waitress took a breath. I didn't insult him, she said quietly. I just didn't let him insult me. The head waiter shook his head. This place doesn't protect people like us, he warned. She knew that already, but she also knew that fear had ruled the room for too long. She prepared the dessert herself, double-checking every detail. When she returned to the table, the CEO watched her again. His plate was nearly empty. He had eaten everything. This is good, he said suddenly, tapping the plate. Thank you, she replied. He paused. Most people here rush. You don't. She nodded. People notice when you care. That simple sentence seemed to settle somewhere deep in him. He looked around the restaurant, at the staff moving quickly, at the manager hovering nervously. For the first time, he seemed aware of the fear he carried into rooms like this. He took a bite of dessert. You're new, he said. Yes. And you're not afraid. She thought for a moment. I am, she said honestly. I just don't let it decide who I am. That answer stayed between them, heavy and real. The CEO finished his meal in silence. No insults. No raised voice. When he stood to leave, everyone watched. The manager rushed forward again, ready to apologize for anything and everything. But the CEO didn't look at him right away. He looked at the waitress. People usually break when challenged, he said quietly. You didn't. She didn't respond. She only nodded politely. He left without another word. The doors closed behind him, and the restaurant released a breath it had been holding all night. The manager stormed toward the kitchen. Anger and fear mixed on his face. She could have ruined us, he snapped. But something stopped him from firing her on the spot. Maybe it was the lack of complaint. Maybe it was the way other guests had watched with interest instead of anger. Or maybe, deep down, he knew she hadn't done anything wrong. The waitress finished her shift quietly. No one celebrated her. No one thanked her. But a few co-workers looked at her differently now. Not with fear, but with a kind of respect. As she walked home that night, the city lights blurred in the distance. She felt tired, but peaceful. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if she would still have this job tomorrow. But she knew one thing. For the first time in a long while, someone powerful had been forced to see her not as a role, not as a background figure, but as a person. And somewhere else in the city, the CEO sat alone in the back of his car, staring at his reflection in the window. Her words echoed in his mind, uncomfortable and clear. He realized something he had avoided for years. Power did not always win. And sometimes it was challenged by the quietest voice in the room. The next morning, the restaurant felt different. The air was quieter, heavier, as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. The staff moved carefully, speaking in low voices. News traveled fast in places like this, and by opening time, everyone knew what had happened the night before. A new waitress had stood her ground. The rude CEO had left without causing a scene. That alone was enough to make people uneasy. The waitress arrived early, like always. She tied her apron, checked the tables, and reviewed the reservations for the day. She acted normal, but inside, her thoughts were loud. She wondered if this would be her last shift. She wondered if the manager would call her into the office and tell her it was over. Still, she chose to show up. Running away would have meant regret. The manager finally approached her near the counter. His face was tight, his voice low. Be careful today, he said. That's all I'll say. She nodded. It wasn't a warning she hadn't already given herself. Customers came and went. Lunch passed without trouble. Some guests were kind. Others were distant. A few looked at her with curiosity, as if they had heard something but didn't know what to believe. She focused on her work, the rhythm of serving helping calm her thoughts. Then, in the afternoon, a black car pulled up outside again. The room froze. Someone whispered, "He's back." The waitress felt her stomach drop, but she didn't move. She stood where she was, hands steady, breathing slow. Part of her wanted to hide in the kitchen. Another part told her that hiding would change nothing. The CEO walked in just as he had the night before. Same suit, same sharp posture. But his eyes were different. They were alert, searching, not bored. The manager rushed forward, speaking quickly, apologizing for nothing in particular. The CEO brushed past him and took his usual seat by the window. The manager hesitated, then looked toward the waitress. "Go," he said quietly. She understood. This was another test. Maybe the final one. She approached the table calmly and placed a glass of water down before he even asked. "Good afternoon," she said. He studied her face for a long moment. "You came back," he said. "Yes," she replied. "I work here." A corner of his mouth lifted slightly, but it wasn't a smile. "Most people disappear after crossing me." She met his gaze. "I didn't cross you," she said. "I just stayed where I was." That answer stayed in the space between them. He leaned back in his chair, silent. For a moment, she wondered if she had gone too far again. He finally spoke. "Sit." Her heart jumped. "I'm not allowed," she said. "I am," he replied. She hesitated, then pulled the chair across from him and sat, keeping her posture straight. This was not normal. Nothing about this was normal. "You don't know who I am," he said. "I know who you are to me," she answered. "A customer." He let out a short breath. "You should be afraid." She shook her head slowly. "Fear teaches people to lie." "I don't want to lie." That surprised him more than anything else she had said so far. He had built his life on fear. Fear made deals move faster. Fear kept people silent. Fear kept control. "Why are you like this?" he asked. She thought carefully before answering. "Because I've been powerless," she said. "And I learned that if I let people take my voice, I lose more than a job." He watched her closely now, not as a threat, but as a story he hadn't heard before. "You think I enjoy being like this?" he asked. She didn't accuse him. She didn't defend him either. "I think people become what they practice," she said. The words hit him harder than he expected. The manager hovered nearby, panic clear on his face. He expected shouting, insults, destruction. Instead, he saw two people talking quietly. The CEO stood up suddenly. The manager flinched. "Bring me my check," the CEO said. She stood as well and nodded. When she returned, the bill was already settled. He placed a card on the table, then paused. "You know," he said, "people around me pretend all day. You didn't." She simply replied, "I don't know how to." He left without another word. The restaurant stayed silent long after the doors closed. The manager finally spoke. "What did you say to him?" "Nothing that wasn't true," she answered. That evening, something unexpected happened. Other staff began talking to her. Not loudly, not dramatically, but honestly. One server admitted she had been afraid to speak up for years. A cook said he had watched good people leave because of guests like him. The waitress listened more than she spoke. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a mirror. Later that night, far away in a quiet office, the CEO stood alone, staring at city lights. Files lay open on his desk. Old complaints, old reports, patterns he had ignored. Her words returned to him. People become what they practice. For the first time, he wondered what he had been practicing all his life. And for the first time, he felt unsure. Not angry, just unsure. The days that followed were uneasy. Nothing dramatic happened at first, which somehow made everything feel heavier. The restaurant stayed busy, but people moved with caution, as if a storm might return at any moment. The waitress kept doing her work, showing up on time, taking orders, clearing tables, and keeping her head down when needed. She didn't seek attention. She didn't tell her story. She just worked. Still, small changes began to appear. Guests who were usually impatient waited a little longer before complaining. A few regulars spoke kindly to staff, almost as if they had noticed something they hadn't before. One evening, a customer thanked the waitress for listening carefully and meant it. That simple thank you stayed with her longer than any tip. Inside the restaurant, staff members slowly grew bolder. A server spoke up when an order was wrong instead of silently fixing it. A cook asked for time off without fear. These were tiny moments, barely visible, but they mattered. Fear had shaped the place for years, and now cracks were forming. The manager noticed too. He didn't say much, but he watched the room more carefully. He stopped shouting over small mistakes. Once, when a guest raised his voice at a young server, the manager stepped in and calmly ended the conversation. Surprised everyone, including himself. The waitress saw all of this and felt a mix of pride and worry. She hadn't planned any of it. She only knew she had spoken honestly that night. Now she wondered if honesty always came with a price. Then the call came. It was a quiet afternoon when the manager asked her to step into the office. His voice was polite, but tight. Her heart sank. She had been waiting for this moment since the first night. He closed the door and took a deep breath. "We received a message," he said. She didn't interrupt. "It was from him," the manager continued. "The CEO." The words landed heavily. "He asked questions," the manager said slowly. "About the restaurant. About how staff are treated. About you." Her hands rested calmly in her lap. "What did you say?" "I told the truth," he replied. "That you did your job. That you were respectful. That nothing you said broke our rules." She nodded. That was all she had hoped for. The manager leaned back. "He's returning tonight," he said. Her chest tightened. "To eat. To talk," he said. "With ownership." That was unexpected. Ownership rarely listened. Ownership usually reacted. The rest of the day passed slowly. Every hour felt longer than the last. When evening arrived, the restaurant prepared again. But this time the fear felt different. It wasn't sharp. It was uncertain. The black car arrived just after sunset. The CEO entered without his usual cold confidence. He looked tired. Not physically, but inside. He greeted no one and went straight to the private table at the back. The owners followed soon after, nervous and curious. The waitress was asked to bring water. Nothing more. She approached the table, keeping her focus on the glasses. The CEO glanced up. "You don't need to stay," he said quietly. "I'm working," she replied. He nodded. "Fair." Voices lowered as the meeting began. She couldn't hear much, only pieces. Words like culture, complaints, and behavior drifted through the air. The owners listened closely. They looked surprised. Times uncomfortable. The CEO spoke without raising his voice. That alone was unusual. He admitted things he had never admitted before. Not excuses. Not blame. Just facts. "I thought fear made things efficient," he said. "It didn't. It made things empty." The owners exchanged glances. At one point he looked toward the waitress again. "You can stay," he said. "I want her to hear this." The room stiffened. She remained where she was, calm but alert. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued, "but I expect accountability, starting with myself." The words felt real, not polished, not practiced. The meeting ended without applause or drama. The owners left quietly, promising changes. Whether those promises would last was unknown. As the CEO stood to leave, he stopped near the waitress. "You changed something," he said. "Not by fighting, by refusing to disappear." She considered his words. "I didn't try to change you," she said. "I just stayed honest." He nodded. That was enough. When he left, the restaurant felt lighter. Not perfect, not safe forever, but different. Later that night, the manager gathered the staff briefly. He spoke without anger, without fear. "We're going to do better," he said. "All of us." No one cheered, but no one doubted him either. As the waitress walked home, she thought about how small moments could shift large spaces. She didn't feel powerful. She felt human. And for once, that felt like enough. Somewhere across the city, the CEO sat alone again, this time not running from his thoughts. Change wouldn't be easy. It never was. But it had begun. And it began with a voice that refused to be quiet. Life did not change overnight. The restaurant did not suddenly become perfect. And the world outside did not slow down to admire what had happened. But something steady had taken root. Something quiet and real. The waitress continued working her shifts. She still carried plates, wiped tables, and smiled at guests who barely noticed her. Some days were good. Some days were hard. The difference now was not in the work itself, but in how she felt doing it. She no longer walked into the restaurant feeling small. The staff noticed it too. Conversations in the kitchen felt lighter. People laughed more freely. When problems came up, they were talked through instead of buried. The manager kept his word. He listened more. He corrected without humiliating. It wasn't perfect leadership, but it was honest effort. One evening, a customer raised his voice at a young server over a delayed order. The room tensed, old habits ready to return. Before fear could settle in, the manager stepped forward and calmly explained the situation. The customer quieted down. The server exhaled in relief. The waitress watched from a distance, feeling something warm in her chest. Moments like that reminded her why she had stayed. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, a small envelope waited for her at the counter. The manager handed it to her without comment. Inside was a handwritten note. It was short. It thanked her for reminding people that respect was not weakness. There was no signature, but she knew who it was from. She folded the note and placed it in her pocket. She didn't smile right away. She felt thoughtful. Change mattered most when it continued without applause. The CEO did not return often after that. When he did, he behaved differently. He greeted staff with brief nods. He spoke clearly without sharp edges. People noticed. Some didn't trust it at first. Others believed people could grow. One quiet afternoon, he arrived alone and sat near the window again. The waitress was assigned to another section, but he asked for her politely. When she approached, he looked older somehow. Not weaker, just more aware. "I wanted to say this properly," he said. "I don't remember the last time someone spoke to me like an equal." She listened. "I spent years believing results were all that mattered," he continued. "I forgot that people create results." She nodded. "It's easy to forget when power gets loud." He gave a small smile. "You didn't shout. That's what made me listen." They didn't talk long. They didn't need to. Some conversations do their work quietly. After he left, the waitress returned to her tasks. She didn't feel proud in a dramatic way. She felt settled. Outside the restaurant, her life continued. Bills still arrived. Mornings still came too early. But she carried herself differently now. She spoke up when needed. She listened when others spoke. She knew her voice had weight, even when spoken softly. One night, after a long shift, she walked home under streetlights that flickered gently. She thought about how many people lived their lives believing silence was safety. She understood why. Silence could feel easier, but she also knew its cost. The restaurant lights faded behind her as she turned the corner. Tomorrow would bring another shift, another set of small choices. She felt ready for them. Elsewhere in the city, the CEO sat in a meeting room filled with people who once feared him. The room felt different now. There was disagreement. There were questions. There was honesty. It was slower, messier, and more real than before. He listened. For the first time, he did not feel the need to dominate the room to feel in control. He remembered the waitress's calm eyes, her steady voice, the way she had not backed away or attacked. She had simply stayed present. That memory guided him more than any business book ever had. Back at the restaurant, a new employee started her first shift. Nervous, quiet, unsure. The waitress noticed and offered a gentle smile, showing her where things were kept, explaining the rhythm of the place. "You'll be okay," she said. "Just be yourself." The new employee nodded, grateful. As the evening moved on, the restaurant filled with the soft sound of plates, voices, and music. Life continued, shaped by countless small moments no one would ever film or praise. But those moments mattered, because change does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes, it arrives in a calm voice that refuses to disappear. And sometimes that is enough.